or represent those of the owners, management, or advertisers of Pacific Telestations Inc. This message has been brought to you by the stations of KUAM.
You're watching Buzz with Jess Lujan.
Good evening, Guam. I'm Jess Lujan. Welcome to this edition of The Buzz. Very exciting show tonight. Good friend, haven't seen in a while. I saw him just before the Guam International Marathon. Former DOE Superintendent Juan Flores. Hey, Juan.
Pretty amazing that you saw me at anything that's to do with a marathon.
Especially a marathon, a running event, right?
That's right. Nobody has to know. It was only the
there
5K part.
Yeah, anyway, but I'm glad I ran into you because I've been quoting you. I've been talking about your articles, actually the past two articles, the one 2 weeks ago and the one just last week. I'm looking forward to your one this week as well. Continue to talk about it. But let's go back to this because I mean, you know, one of my friends used to say you hit the nail on the wood, you know, but you really hit the nail on the head when in my view here, where you say the education for self-determination is much needed. Why did you come up with that?
You know, actually, a lot of it has to do with thinking about and talking about Guam history in general.
And you're currently teaching that, right?
When I was teaching at the charter school, one of the things that I talked to the students about were the individuals who've been involved with Guam's history, right?
Okay.
So there, a bunch of the students came from F.B. Leon Guerrero.
Sure.
And I said, why was the school named after Mr. Leon Guerrero? Well, we don't know, but they put a statue there. And I said, you know, without Mr. F.B. Leon Guerrero, you might not be a citizen today. And the kids had no concept that that was an important, he was an important person in our history. And it made me think, how are we going to ask these young people to make a decision about what we're going to become or what relationship we're going to have with the United States? They don't even know what the history is. And they may not even know what the ramifications are of this vote. And I still see it, more than anything else we've done, as a really pivotal milestone.
Now let me ask you this, because I think, again, you hit it right on the head when you wrote this article. But even before we start education on the three statuses that when and if we have an opportunity to vote, that we will vote on it, don't we have to define ourselves at this point, who we are? Because I'm sure often you hear, well, you know, I want to vote on the status quo. Well, what is the status quo? What does that mean? What does unincorporated territory mean versus incorporated? You know, prior to Hawaii becoming a state, they were called an incorporated territory, which meant it was a promise to be a state.
Correct.
We're unincorporated. What does unincorporated mean? Don't we have to understand that and say, here's what we are? Because people will say, we're on status quo. Well, what is status quo? What does that mean?
Yeah. I sometimes think that it's like being pre-engaged, right? You're not really engaged, right? So you don't know if a wedding's actually going to occur, but you're pre-engaged, so you've made sort of a commitment, and maybe you want to be exclusive, right? But it doesn't mean that the next step is coming, and that's the part that we've got to think about now. Is that good for us? Maybe. Is that something we ought to just take advantage of in the future? Maybe, but I think it's something we should talk about. And I think I agree with you. I think we ought to really define who we are. And you know, again, in the Guam history, some students are amazed that there's actually evidence that there was a time when there were no people on Guam. Everybody on Guam is an immigrant, an immigrant from somewhere, right? And so how do these people define who they are, and who should those people be? I actually think that's the toughest question in all of this, is who's going to make that decision. But what do we want? So if I think that what I want is the benefits of being somehow connected to the United States, but I also want to feel like I'm in the Western Pacific, and can have the relationship with Asia that I want, or the rest of our brothers and sisters in Micronesia, then how do we incorporate both of those things? If all we want is to make money, then that's an avenue we got to look at. If all we want is to enhance our culture, then that's what we look at. If all we want is to celebrate diversity, then we got to pay attention to that.
Because, you know, last week's writing, you said hey, we also have to remember the Inifresi and what is said in the Inifresi, the land, the water, was it the skies, or
it's the land, the water, and the land, the water, and the air.
And the air, yeah. And actually, when I was talking about it, someone called it, hey, we have to remember the culture. But and these two articles go hand in hand. They really do, because to understand that, and we're not going to find any kids that probably have not memorized the Inifresi, But what is that saying? And how does that relate to our self-determination? How does that relate to who we are? And how are we going to preserve that? How do we best preserve that in the choices that we may possibly have?
Well, and I think you use a word that actually a wise person many years ago warned me against using, and that's the word preserve when you're thinking about culture. As if we ought to take our culture, put it in formaldehyde, and then just put it on a shelf, right? Well, we don't use formaldehyde anymore, but as if we're just going to put it on a shelf and look at it, because it changes.
Sure.
Right? When I was challenged once that I'm not following the culture as I should, and I said, well, why are we wearing clothes? Because the first Chamorros didn't wear clothes.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So maybe we should walk around naked because that's part of the culture, right? Well, that's ridiculous. But the idea is the culture is going to change.
No, I think we're reverting back. One of our mayors almost did. So
Well,
anyway,
I'm not going to touch that one.
not gonna touch that.
It's a difficult one to massage. But the idea is that when we get to decide who we are, I think we're always going to look back, right? We're going to think about, well, what were we taught when we were young? How do we bring the ideas of people who are not even around? And one of the things I mentioned in the column was there's a generation of people now, the last generation, that were part of World War II. When are we going to do something so they can have a say? Because otherwise we're going to lose them. I mean, my father's already gone. He's not going to have a chance to have a say. And your parents are gone as well. But I want my mother to have a say. You know, and I want her and her brother and others in their generation
to be able to see that day.
And to also know that what they say is valuable.
And what they have done is, and they help to bring us to that next place.
I was asked, I remember being in college, and I was asked why the people in Guam are so loyal. Because even 35, 40 years ago, the percentage of people on Guam who went into the military, who died in the Vietnam War, which affected us all, was always so high, right? People say, well, what is it with the people in Guam? And I remember thinking, the people in Guam are people who went from the Spanish to the Americans, right? And then, and they knew the atrocities of the Spanish back then. So the Americans kind of saved us. Then we go to the Japanese occupation, and that was a tough time because of war. And again, it's the Americans who came in and saved us. That's one of my explanations. So what's our relationship going to be with the United States? Is it still going to be that the U.S. government is going to be paternalistic? Does somebody always have to tell us what to do? Or at some point, do we get to drive the car and we decide where to drive that car?
well, the difference is we are driving the car, okay? But somebody sitting in the
backseat driver,
backseat, and telling us what to do, and we happen to be wearing a hat.
Yeah.
Yes, master.
Yeah.
Be right back. Got to pay some bills.